So, my good buddy Argent recently did a survey of the dissident right or the alt-right, whatever you want to call it. I will post the link in the description. And I thought I'd just do a brief video talking about my thoughts of the findings because I think there were some very interesting findings in this survey. The number one conclusion I would take out of it is that libertarians within the right are kind of the odd man out. If you look at all these questions, for a lot of them, libertarians had a very different answer from every other group. And what I think that says is that they're not us. They're something else. Many of us are ex-libertarians. I even, believe it or not, used to identify as a libertarian at one point. And that is by and large the base that we've recruited from. But at the same time, in this day and age, in the current year, in 2019, if you're still calling yourself a libertarian, I don't think you're one of us. Because on issues like, say, porn, divorce, casual sex, abortion, even immigration, the libertarians are just so radically different from us in terms of what they believe that I don't think we're even really on the same side. And especially considering that many in the dissident right are shifting toward left-wing economic views, like socialist views, even as they retain their right-wing social views. So I think that's the number one take from this survey. It underlines something that I've been thinking for a long time, which is that libertarians, they're not us. They're another thing. The second takeaway is that the thing that I really liked was people's responses on the architecture question. And not to toot my own horn too much, but I'd like to think that my videos have played a part in that. Because I have had many people in the past tell me that they really liked my videos on architecture. And yes, I know my channel today is fucking pathetic, like if you look at the view counts, but, a few years ago, those videos were getting significant views. Like a lot of people were watching them and a lot of people did tell me how much they appreciated them. And yes, like I have kind of downsized this channel on purpose. But at the same time, I'm glad if I've made any impact there, I'm really happy about it. So I think almost 90%, I think something like 88%, yeah, 88% supported traditional forms of architecture. A very fitting number. I'm happy about that. And I think that number might have been even higher because if Argent had basically divided the modern category, because I think Art Deco isn't the same as like post World War II architecture. I think they kind of deserve to be in two separate categories because Art Deco carries on the themes of traditional architecture in the sense that it's anchored in cultural hegemony. It's anchored in cultural tradition, and it is inspired by traditional styles, and it has artistic elements that are complex. Whereas modernist architecture is defined by being very simple, very utilitarian. Like everything is entirely about functionality and efficiency, even though it's often not actually that efficient. But the point is, Art Deco is not because it has artistic elements, and in terms of the materials used to construct the buildings, in terms of the references often to classical European styles, like the uses of statues, statuary often incorporated into the buildings. Like there's one Art Deco skyscraper, I believe it's the CIBC building in downtown Toronto. Like there's multiple CIBC buildings, but this one is their original headquarters, and it has faces in the top of the building, kind of like almost something you'd see in Lord of the Rings. And Art Deco encompasses a lot of things, like from the more modern versions, such as the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building, to older types of skyscrapers that could almost be considered neo-Gothic. And it's not just skyscrapers, obviously, smaller buildings too. But the point is, like Prague, for instance, has a lot of beautiful Art Deco buildings in its older areas. So yeah, the point is, I meant, sorry, not its older, like its newer old areas. Like the new part of the old town of Prague has a lot of beautiful Art Deco style buildings. So my point is, I don't think Art Deco should even be in the same category as your typical plain glass skyscraper. I think they deserve to be in separate categories. So I think if that had been done, the discrepancy might have been even greater. It could have been like, 93% in favor of traditional styles. Hardly anyone chose postmodern, and a few did choose modern, which included Art Deco. So I'm going to say, like, by and large, people reject modernist architecture in the alt-right, which is a good thing. When I looked at the subdivisions of the various groups, like, almost every single category voted in favor of modernist styles less than 20%. The only one of the few exceptions, bizarrely enough, well, not actually bizarrely, but interestingly, was people with kind of communist economic views. Like, I forget what was the term that Argent used. Command economy or something like that. Like those people actually voted for modernist styles at a rate of 27%, so which was the highest of any group. So yeah, I gotta watch the commies on that one. I mean, my economic views are left of center, but I'd call myself more third positionist than communist for sure. Like I've never identified as communist. But yeah, like I mean, I guess some of them are still holding to those like old Soviet principles of like communal housing or whatever, efficiency, housing for the proletariat, based on minimum cost to house a maximum number of people. But at the same time, even then, it was only 27%. So even in that group, the vast majority, 73%, voted in favor of traditional styles. Now, third position, fascists actually voted for modernist styles a bit more than the average, too. They were, I think, about 19% in favor of it. So, again, it is partly a reflection of the era, which is why, I don't blindly follow any kind of ideology. So, I mean, if fascism was flawed in terms of architecture, so be it. Um, I mean, that's my main critique of all ideologies from that era, whether it be communism or fascism, is everything was too modernist. Everything wanted to break with the past. And I think that's the problem of that entire era from like essentially the 30s to the 70s is like in architecture and urban planning in general, in rejecting all forms of tradition, every ideology was about breaking with the past, even fascism in its own way. But I mean, fascism was a bit of both. Like there's a synthesis of modernism and traditionalism. But yeah, my point is the fact that fascists, like third positionists, voted for modernist architecture a bit more than most people might show that there is a flaw there in that ideology. But at the same time, it is still only 19%. So 81% voted in favor of traditionalist styles. So overall, yeah, I'm very happy with that result. I'm very happy with it. It shows that our movement is largely unified on this issue, which is great because I used to think that this was potentially a contentious issue. Because I have had some alt-right people criticize me in my comment section saying like, oh, we need to embrace futurism. We need white Singapore. We need a society full of white people. It's like the Jetsons or whatever. And it's like, no, okay, like there's no cultural heritage expressed by glass skyscrapers. If we're gonna have a society full of glass skyscrapers, and buildings with no cultural relevance and no culturally specific architecture, why not just mix with Asians? If we're going to do that, we might as well be Happas. We might as well be anime people. Because, man, it sounds a lot like IQ nationalism to me, like futurism, like all you want is Coruscant, then just become Happas. But if you actually care about preserving your heritage, then I think it makes sense to go with traditional styles of architecture because that's a very important part of your heritage. And I think especially people who've traveled to Europe would understand that. Anyway, or who are from Europe, obviously. Anyway, okay. I was happy with that result. I wasn't as happy with the results of a few other questions. Now, these aren't quite as important. Well, okay. The global warming one is important. I was pretty disappointed with that. I think we have a long way to go on this issue. And yes, I agree. There are huge problems with the mainstream environmentalist movement. Greta Thunberg, I hate that girl. I wish she would just get out of the spotlight. I mean, I know it sounds mean to pick on a kid, but it's like she's promoting some pretty stupid messages, like going after meat and planes when really automobiles are the main culprit. I mean, personally, I think she's on the payroll of car companies for to deflect attention away from them, even though they're by far the biggest source of carbon emissions, especially well after power plants. But like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, Greta Thunberg, mainstream environmentalism, it sucks, but at the same time, doesn't mean that global warming, man-made global warming, is not a real thing. Because I honestly believe it is. And I don't see how believing it is contradicts our narrative because this whole like revolt against the modern world thing, it's like, well, what is more a symbol of modernist decadence and consumerism and globalism than pumping filth into the air for the sake of mud GDP, you know? And let me remind everyone again, the biggest carbon footprint per capita in the world is Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf countries. And I think a good argument that can be made against immigration is why are we increasing the carbon footprint of people from poorer countries by bringing them here? But I think, yeah, like in terms of global warming, a lot needs to be done. Like I think a lot of alt-righters, they they latch on to these like libertarian conspiracy theories, like oh, global warming, it's some UN sham to just create global government or whatever. But it's like I don't know. A lot of these seem to be cut from the same cloth as all these radical capitalist theories like, oh, socialism bad. You know, all forms of social programs are bad. We need tiny government. And like a lot of the alt-right has gone beyond that. But I think they haven't gone beyond it fully yet on this particular issue. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed there. Another one I was disappointed with was again healthcare for similar reasons. Although it wasn't quite. I think the healthcare opinions were a bit more nuanced. So that was slight. I mean, I'm more in favor of public healthcare, but again, like it was. So a lot of the in between options I think might be reasonable. To be honest, I'm not as well informed on this issue, so I can't really comment that much. But it was a bit more libertarian than I was hoping for. Finally, the other issue, guns. To be honest, I was shocked how completely monolithic the opinion was on guns. I actually voted for, I think, one of the in-between ones, like either long guns only or like ban assault rifles or whatever. To be honest, assault rifles aren't the main problem. Handguns are. If you look at statistics, handguns are by far used in more murders than assault rifles are. The only reason why assault rifles are so high profile is because of mass shootings. But in terms of day-to-day life, you're more likely to get killed by a handgun by far. And more gang members use handguns because they're easily concealable. That's what's mostly used in gang warfare and in, petty crime. So really, I think handguns are the main problem, not assault rifles. But either way, my point is, yeah, I'm not as enthusiastically pro-gun as some people are in these circles. I mean, I honestly don't think you should own a gun if you feel that you are mentally unstable, for instance, whereas I've heard some people on the right say that everyone should own a gun no matter what. Some have even gone so far as to say everyone should be forced to own a gun, even if you don't want to. Which actually is the policy in Switzerland, bizarrely enough. But they're a weird country, so whatever. Yeah, I mean, so I'm not saying that I'm anti-gun, but I did vote for one of the in-between options, and the vast majority of people across the board voted like no gun restrictions whatsoever. So like literally you can walk down the street carrying an AK-47 in broad view. I don't agree with that. We live in a society, and the kind of society you get with that is the Wild West. And no, I mean, Red Dead Redemption is a fun game to play, but I don't want to live in that kind of society. So, or GTA for that matter. So yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on that issue. And on the survey in general. I think it was a really good survey. And my hat is off to Argent for taking the time and effort to do it. So that's all for now.